Parker family estate gleamed beneath a canopy of crystal chandeliers and candlelit trees. Laughter floated through the manicured garden, where a string quartet played beneath a rose-draped gazebo. Guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos sipped champagne and shared whispers about the glamorous couple being celebrated and the equally glamorous Parkers who hosted. Carter Parker stood near the bar, drink in hand, the glow of the venue dancing against his rich brown skin. He wore a sharp black tux with a champagne-colored pocket square, a nod to the night's theme. His jaw was clean-shaven, his hair fresh from the barber, and his expression held the relaxed confidence of a man used to commanding attention. Yet tonight, his attention wasn't on the guest list of socialites or influencers. It was on her. Across the room, weaving gracefully between tables with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, was Renee Perry. Her dark curls were pinned back into a neat bun, and her eyes sparkled with intelligence behind subtle eyeliner. Dressed in a simple black uniform, she didn't blend in, she stood out. Not because she was the only server working with such grace, but because she carried herself with the poise of someone who knew she belonged to more than this moment. Carter watched as a particularly rude guest, some hedge fund leech with too much champagne and not enough class, snapped his fingers to get her attention. Renee walked over smoothly, a polite smile on her lips. "You took your sweet time," the man sneered. "My apologies," she said coolly. "Next time I'll notify the appetizers in advance to sprint." A few nearby guests chuckled. The man blinked, unsure how to respond as she offered the tray with a professional nod and moved on. Unbothered, Carter smirked, watching the entire exchange. That, he muttered to himself, was flawless. Beside him, Riley Parker, his younger sister and the true power broker of the Parker Foundation, raised an eyebrow at him. "I saw that look," she said, swirling her wine. Don't what?" Carter replied, not looking away as Renee greeted another guest with her signature blend of charm and confidence. "Don't chase her like you do every other pretty woman who crosses your path," Riley warned. "She's not like them. She's smart, driven, she's got goals." He turned to face his sister, feigning offense. "You act like I'm a villain." Riley folded her arms. "I act like your sister, and I've seen you get bored after 3 dates. Renee Perry doesn't need to be your next distraction." "I'm not planning anything. I just appreciate good service," Carter said with a grin, before stepping away. Riley narrowed her eyes, watching her brother approach Renee. Lord help her. Renee had just finished clearing a table when she felt someone near. She turned and found herself face to face with the man everyone was whispering about tonight, Carter Parker. Up close, he was taller than she imagined. His confidence wasn't arrogant, but it had the weight of someone who always got a second look, and knew it. "Evening," he said, his voice a warm baritone. "Good evening, Mr. Parker," Renee replied, professional and composed. "I caught your performance earlier," he said with a smile. "You handled that guest like a queen in disguise." "Thank you, comes with the territory. You're more than just a server though, right?" She lifted an eyebrow. "That's not usually how small talk goes." He chuckled. "I meant it as a compliment. You carry yourself like someone with bigger plans." Renee nodded cautiously. "I'm in business school, hoping to open my own catering company one day." "That explains the poise," he said, pulling something from his jacket pocket. "In case you ever want advice, or more." He handed her a folded note with his personal number scribbled inside. "Call me." He finished. Renee stared at it for a second, then tucked it discreetly into her pocket. "I appreciate the gesture." "But," he said knowingly. She gave him a soft smile. "Let's just say I've heard about your reputation, and I'm not looking to become another story in your highlight reel." Carter didn't flinch. "Fair enough. I'm flattered, Mr. Parker, really. But I work too hard to have it all undone by a man who thinks more is just a temporary arrangement." He nodded, impressed. "Renee, right?" She nodded. "Well, Renee, whether you call or not, I'll be rooting for that catering company." She gave him a polite nod and turned, walking away without looking back. Later that night, Riley found Carter alone near the fountain. "She turned you down, didn't she?" Riley said, sipping her wine again. Carter chuckled. "She's sharp. Not impressed by charm, suits, or the Parker name." "Good, then maybe she'll go far," Riley said. "She will." Carter agreed, his gaze drifting to where Renee was laughing with another server. I'm not used to being the one left standing. Maybe that's exactly what you need. Carter didn't argue. Instead, he slipped his hands into his pockets and watched Renee one last time, the slip of paper still with her, still burning with possibility. And for once, the man who had everything was willing to wait. Weeks passed. For a man like Carter Parker, silence was a foreign language, especially when it came from a woman he had shown interest in. His phone remained stubbornly silent, no calls, no texts, not even a thank you note for the number he passed along to Renee Perry at the engagement party. At first, he brushed it off. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she lost the note. Maybe she was playing hard to get. But by week 3, it gnawed at him. Carter Parker didn't get ignored. It wasn't just about ego, though that certainly stung. It was her, the way she'd looked at him, with clear, unreadable eyes. The way she'd spoken, measured but confident. She wasn't dazzled by his wealth or name, like so many others. That intrigued him more than he cared to admit. He found himself replaying that brief interaction far too often. The smirk on her lips when she said she wasn't interested in being a highlight reel. The way she hadn't missed a beat when he handed her his number. She wasn't impressed, but she noticed him. He felt it. One evening, Carter sat at the rooftop bar of the Lenox Hotel, nursing a neat pour of his favorite bourbon, when Riley slid into the seat across from him. "You've been moody," she said, sipping her cocktail. Carter didn't respond. Riley arched an eyebrow. "Let me guess, Renee Perry hasn't called." His eyes flicked up. "Oh, come on," she said with a laugh. "You're obvious. You keep checking your phone, like it's going to ring. And every time I mention the foundation, your ears perk up." He swirled the ice in his glass. "How well do you know her?" "Well enough," Riley said cautiously. "She's part of our hospitality scholarship program. We sponsored her last semester through the Parker Foundation." He straightened a bit. "So she's one of ours." "She earned it, Carter," Riley said firmly. "Top of her class. She works full-time and still manages honors. She's the real deal." Carter leaned back, mind turning. "What's her full name?" Riley narrowed her eyes. "Why?" "I just want to follow up, maybe give her some professional advice." "Don't lie to me, you're planning something," she said, setting her drink down. "Don't screw this up for her." "I'm not trying to screw anything up," he said smoothly. "I'm just curious." The next morning, Carter called in a favor. Within the hour, he had Renee's full name, Renee Danielle Perry. With that, the rest came easily. Her LinkedIn profile, the catering company she worked for part-time, the business school she attended, Evermore Culinary and Business Institute, an exclusive program that trained hospitality entrepreneurs in both culinary arts and business management. The perfect place for a woman like her. Sharp, ambitious, and on the rise. He didn't tell anyone he was going. He didn't even fully admit it to himself. But a week later, Carter found himself walking into the Evermore networking mixer, hosted in a modern event space downtown. The room buzzed with young professionals and local investors. Tables showcased student-run businesses, each hoping to catch the eye of potential backers. He wore a tailored charcoal suit, just enough flash to draw attention, but subtle enough to blend in. He wasn't on any panel or program list. He was just there. Then he saw her. Renee stood by her table, which bore the name Perry and Plate, Curated Catering, Elevated Experiences. Her display was neat, minimalist, with elegant food samples and professional brochures. She was in a cream blouse, sleeves rolled to her elbows, curly hair loose around her shoulders. She was radiant. And then she looked up and froze. Their eyes met across the room. Her lips parted slightly, but her expression stayed guarded. Carter made his way over casually, like they'd simply run into each other on the street. "Well," he said, as if the universe had brought him there by accident. "Fancy meeting you here." Renee blinked, folding her arms. "You don't even go here?" "True," he admitted with a smile. "But I was invited to scout for new talent. Looks like I picked the right night." Renee gave a short laugh, unimpressed. "You tracked me down." He lifted his hands innocently. "Guilty, but only because you never called." Because I didn't plan to, she said plainly. That hurt, Carter said, placing a hand to his chest. Do you know how many women would have called me? That's probably why I didn't, she replied. For a moment, they just looked at each other. The air between them tight with unspoken things. I'm serious, Renee, he said, softer now. You're impressive. I wasn't joking at the party. If there's anything I can do to help your business, connect you with vendors, logistics advice, I mean it. I believe you, she said. But I don't trust you. That landed harder than expected. Carter's smile faded. I've worked hard to get here, Renee continued. And I've heard enough stories about you to know I can't afford the distraction. Especially one that comes wrapped in charm and private jets. He nodded slowly. Fair. But, she added, her voice gentler now, I do appreciate that you showed up. Just, next time, don't pretend it's a coincidence. You're too smart for that. Carter gave a short laugh. Noted. Renee glanced at her table, then back at him. I have to get back to work. He stepped aside. Of course. She walked away, greeting another guest. Carter stayed back for a moment, watching her work her table with grace and grit. For the first time in a long time, Carter Parker didn't feel in control. And he liked it. 2 weeks after the Evermore mixer, Carter Parker was still unsettled. He had shown up in person. He had spoken with sincerity. He had even offered genuine help, logistics contacts, vendor recommendations, introductions to his network. And still, nothing. No text, no call. Not even a thank you message. It was messing with him. Carter Parker wasn't the type to chase. He didn't need to. Women came to him. So why was he constantly refreshing his inbox like a lovesick teenager? He'd reached his limit. If being direct hadn't worked, maybe something bigger would. And Carter knew big. So when he learned that Evermore's students were showcasing their final projects at the city's Culinary Innovation Expo, open to the public and crawling with potential investors, he hatched a plan. He made a phone call to the expo's organizers, casually offering to sponsor the entire student showcase booth. In exchange, he requested one small touch, a premium, featured display space for Perry and Plate, complete with custom signage and a beautifully staged food presentation area. He didn't tell Renee. The morning of the event, Carter stood off to the side, watching from a safe distance as students and visitors filed in. Cameras clicked. News crews hovered near the entrance. His company's logistics arm had delivered trays, sleek furniture, even custom-made signage, all reading Perry and Plate, a vision in hospitality supported by Parker Logistics. Renee arrived 5 minutes later, wearing a professional navy rack dress and her ever-present poise. Then she saw the display. Her smile vanished, her brows furrowed. She walked straight up to the expo organizer and asked something. Why the hell is my booth branded with Parker's name? The organizer gestured toward Carter's direction. She turned. Their eyes locked, and for the first time, she looked furious. She didn't come over. She didn't wave. She didn't even acknowledge him again. Instead, she asked for a roll of tape and covered his logo with a printed version of her own brand's emblem from her folder. Carter blinked, stunned. Wow, came a voice from behind him. That was brutal. He turned to see Riley standing there, arms crossed, sunglasses on, chewing a piece of gum with entirely too much amusement. What are you doing here? Carter asked, shoulders tight. I was invited, Riley said. Unlike you, I didn't crash the party with a publicity stunt and get rejected in front of 20 food bloggers. Carter glared at her. Riley raised her hands. Hey, I warned you. She's not the type to be dazzled by showy moves. I was trying to help, Carter said, defensive. This is literally what I do. Elevate brands, create exposure, build partnerships. Right, Riley said with a smirk. And in return, you expected what? A grateful smile? A private dinner? Her heart delivered on a silver platter? Carter exhaled sharply, turning away to stare at Renee again. She was talking with a local chef now, professionally polite but visibly frustrated. She didn't even glance his way. I don't get it, he muttered. You don't get her, Riley corrected. She doesn't need to be saved. She doesn't want to be impressed. She wants to build something on her own. And you're so used to being the prize that you haven't realized she's the one you have to earn. Carter looked down, embarrassed. So what do I do? Riley was quiet for a moment. Then she looped her arm around his. First, stop making everything about you. He winced. Second, she continued. If you're serious about her, really serious, then take the time to learn what matters to her. Help her without expecting credit. Respect her hustle, and for the love of God, stop acting like you're doing her a favor. I wasn't. He sighed. Fine. Riley studied him for a second. You're not used to this. He shook his head. It's different. She smiled. Then maybe it's real. He glanced toward Renee again. She was back at her table now, helping a younger student with a shaky tray. Calm, generous, graceful under pressure. Real. Carter nodded slowly. All right, no more stunts. Riley patted his shoulder. Good. Now go home before she throws a canapé at you. He smiled faintly, then turned and made his quiet exit. This time not as the man in control, but as the man willing to learn. Because for the first time in a long time, he wanted to get it right. 2 days after his botched expo stunt, Carter Parker sat at his desk in the penthouse suite of Parker Tower, staring at a blank piece of heavy cardstock. A handwritten letter. It felt archaic in an age of text messages and emails, but maybe that was the point. He didn't want digital charm or convenient apologies. He wanted sincerity, something real, something she would respect. He picked up the pen and wrote slowly, deliberately. Renee, I want to sincerely apologize for what happened at the expo. My intentions were good, but I see now that I went about it all wrong. I crossed a boundary I had no right to, and I made something that should have been yours, about me. You don't need my spotlight. You're creating your own. I respect your drive, your ambition, and the way you carry yourself, with purpose. You don't owe me your time or attention, but I owe you the courtesy of space and the decency to earn whatever future interaction we may have. No games, no stunts, just respect. If we ever cross paths again, I hope you'll see I meant that. Carter. He sent it with a simple bouquet, nothing romantic, just a clean arrangement of white tulips. The kind that said, I see your strength, instead of, I'm trying to win you. And then he waited. 2 weeks later, Carter stepped into La Maison Vert, an upscale fusion restaurant perched on the edge of downtown. The atmosphere hummed with soft jazz and murmured conversation. Gold light glinted off crystal glasses and white linen tablecloths. He wasn't there for business, just a low-key night out with a few of his longtime friends. But when he spotted her across the room, everything else faded. Renee Perry, dressed in sleek black slacks, a fitted blouse, and a navy apron, she was walking beside the general manager, listening intently and occasionally jotting something in a small notebook. Her curls were pulled back in a low puff, her posture straight and composed. She didn't see him, or maybe she did, and simply chose not to. Carter sat at his table, surrounded by laughter and chatter. A woman at the next table, a beauty in a red dress, leaned in a little too close, brushing her fingers against his arm with a smile. He gave her a polite nod, then turned back to his water glass. He didn't flirt. He didn't engage. His eyes were on Renee. Every time she passed, his gaze followed. Every time she offered a polite smile to a customer or handled a hiccup with calm efficiency, admiration stirred in his chest. But she never looked his way, not once. By the end of the evening, Carter's friends filtered out, thanking him for dinner and disappearing into waiting black cars. The restaurant was winding down, the last of the guests paying their checks. Renee was behind the hostess stand, helping the manager tally the night's numbers. When she finally walked out through the back patio entrance, Carter was already waiting near the valet. She paused, caught off guard, but not startled. Her eyes drifted to him, then to her watch. He smiled gently. No stunts tonight, just a guy standing by the valet, hoping to talk. Renee gave a small, amused sigh. You're persistent. Trying to be consistent, he said. I know I'm not owed anything, but I was wondering if you might want to meet for coffee sometime. Her eyes searched his face for a long moment. She seemed to measure his words, testing their weight, looking for cracks. Then she tilted her head. "I'll give you a call later." She turned to walk toward her rideshare. Carter nodded, accepting that. But just before she got in, she paused, turned her head slightly, and added softly, "I need to get home. It's been a long day." Their eyes met. This time, something softer passing between them. And then she was gone. No promise, no certainty. Renee unlocked the front door and stepped inside the modest but cozy two-bedroom apartment she shared with her mother and daughter. "Mom." "And I'm home," she called out, kicking off her flats and shrugging off her jacket. The scent of lavender and faint vanilla from a diffuser greeted her like a familiar embrace. Melody's soft voice drifted from the hallway. "Okay, baby." Renee made her way down the hall, peeking inside the bedroom. Her 3-year-old daughter, Nicole, was curled under her unicorn blanket, thumb in mouth, one pudgy arm wrapped around her favorite stuffed giraffe. Renee's heart melted, as it always did. She leaned down and kissed Nicole's cheek gently, whispering, "Mommy's here." Nicole stirred, let out a sleepy sigh but didn't wake. Renee stood still for a moment, brushing her daughter's curls off her forehead. These moments kept her grounded, reminded her what all the hustle was for. The next morning, the smell of brewing coffee filled the kitchen as the early sunlight streamed in through the blinds. Melody sat at the table, already dressed in her scrubs, tying her shoelaces while Renee scooped scrambled eggs onto 2 plates. "You got in late last night," Melody said, taking a bite. "How was the restaurant?" "Busy, eye-opening," Renee replied, sipping her coffee. "I shadowed the floor manager the whole shift. Learned how to deal with last-minute reservation changes, a double-booked birthday party, and a sous chef meltdown." Melody grinned. "Sounds about right." Renee paused, swirling her fork in her eggs. "I saw him again." Melody gave her a look. "Him?" Renee nodded. "Carter Parker." "Uh-huh, and?" "He didn't try anything. No showboating. Just watched. Quiet, respectful," Renee said. "Then asked if we could meet for coffee sometime. And?" "I told him I'd call later." Melody raised her brows. "You gonna?" Renee stood up, wiped her hands, and grabbed her phone. "Yeah, I think I am." Later that afternoon, Carter was already seated at Maple and Grind, a locally owned coffee shop known for its handcrafted drinks and artisan pastries. He wore a light gray sweater, no suit, no polished facade. Just Carter, the man, trying to show up differently. When the door opened and he looked up, his breath caught. Renee walked in, confidently but not alone. A small girl held her hand, swinging it casually as she looked around the cafe with curious eyes. Renee approached the table with a calm smile. "Hope you don't mind, I brought my daughter." "Of course not," Carter said, standing. "And who's this young lady?" Nicole tilted her head shyly and leaned into Renee's leg. "This is Nicole," Renee said, smoothing down her daughter's curls. "She's 3 and extremely picky about who she warms up to." Carter crouched to her level. "Well, Nicole, it's very nice to meet you. Do you like chocolate chip muffins? I heard they make some really good ones here." Nicole looked up at her mother, then gave Carter a tiny nod. Renee blinked, surprised. "She's got good instincts," Carter replied with a grin, then waved over the barista. "Can we get a muffin and a warm milk over here, please?" They sat down, Nicole between them, distracted by the muffin in her sippy cup while Renee watched Carter quietly. "You're good with kids," she said. "I like kids," he replied. "They're honest. No performance, no fake smiles. That's not something most people expect from you." "There's more to me than what people expect," he said, voice steady now. "People see the cars, the headlines, the business moves, but they don't see this. The part of me that values family. Quiet mornings. Long-term things." Renee looked at him for a long moment. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because," Carter said gently, "I want you to know who I really am. Not the man from the tabloids. Not the guy who screwed up your expo booth. Just the man who's trying to earn your trust." Nicole reached out for another bite of muffin, and Carter handed it to her without missing a beat. Renee's lips tugged into a soft smile, something unreadable flickering in her eyes. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something real. Carter leaned forward slightly, his voice low and sincere, as Nicole happily munched beside them. "Renee," he began, eyes fixed on hers, "I owe you another apology. For the expo stunt. For the assumptions. For trying to impress instead of just listening." Renee tilted her head, her expression unreadable. He continued, "Back then, I thought I was helping. But now I see. I didn't understand what you were working so hard for. This." He glanced at Nicole with a warm smile. "She is your why, your business, your goals. They're not just dreams. They're building blocks for her future." Renee's gaze softened for a brief second before she caught herself and straightened her posture. "So what are you saying now?" "I'm saying," Carter said carefully, "let me help, really help. No expectations, no strings, no hidden agendas." She studied him. "Why?" Carter hesitated, then gave a small chuckle. "Because Riley called me out. Told me that if I didn't stop chasing after women who look good on paper and start paying attention to the kind of woman who actually builds something, who has purpose, I was going to miss the woman I need. Not just the one I want." He looked directly at her, letting the weight of his next words settle between them. "And I think you could be both." Renee's breath caught in her throat. For a second, she looked away, overwhelmed by the sincerity in his voice. "And because," he added, "I'm willing to burn your trust. Not demand it, not shortcut it, earn it." He leaned back, keeping his tone light now. "I've got a friend, Janelle Crosby. She invests in small, women-led startups, especially in hospitality. When you're ready, I can introduce you. No pressure. Just a door. One you can choose to walk through when it feels right." Renee blinked, surprised. "You'd really do that for me? For you?" "Yes," Carter said without hesitation. "Because I want to be the kind of man who shows up right, not just when it's convenient." Nicole giggled, dropping a crumb on the table, and Carter gently wiped it away with a napkin. Renee watched the moment quietly, her walls not gone, but maybe, for the first time, shifting. "All right," she said softly. "I'll think about it." Carter smiled. "That's all I ask." The past 3 months had settled into something steady, not quite romantic, but certainly intentional. Carter and Renee met often, coffee dates, quiet lunches, afternoon outings with Nicole. He never pushed, never assumed. He was just there, present, reliable. Nicole had grown fond of him quickly, often asking if Mr. Carter was coming along. She'd squeal when he showed up with bubbles or a small snack, and she always insisted he hold her hand when they crossed the street. Renee kept things cordial, cautious, but she noticed. She noticed how he never missed a meetup, how he asked real questions about her goals, and how he looked at Nicole like she mattered just as much as she did. Still, her heart stayed guarded. Until that day in the park. It was a sunny Sunday afternoon. Renee spread out a blanket while Carter unpacked sandwiches. Nicole was off in the grassy clearing nearby, running with the energy only toddlers possessed. The air smelled of fresh grass and ice cream cones, and for a moment, everything felt easy. But then, out of nowhere, Nicole shrieked with glee and took off running toward a tall figure who had just stepped off the sidewalk path. Carter turned to see a man crouching down with open arms. Nicole rushed into them without hesitation. He scooped her up and spun her around. "There's my girl!" Renee stood so fast, the sandwich in her lap dropped onto the blanket. "Nicole!" she barked, already halfway across the field. Carter stood too, but stayed back, eyes narrowing. When Renee reached them, her face was tight with fury. "Why are you here, Craig? You're supposed to be in Phoenix with your wife." Craig, a man in his mid-30s, with a sculpted beard, too smooth smile, and well-fitted leather jacket, set Nicole down and had the nerve to act calm. "Renee, don't do this here. You don't get to tell me what to do," she snapped. "You've been gone for almost a year. A handful of FaceTime calls and broken promises. Now you just show up like some weekend hero?" "I'm getting divorced," he said. "I want to spend time with my daughter." "You've got 15 minutes. Her voice dropped into a deadly whisper. And next time you show up, bring child support. Nicole deserves more than a smile and a once-a-month video call. I've changed, Craig said softly, glancing over at Carter now. Things are different. Renee rolled her eyes. You have 13 minutes now. Carter stood still by the blanket, watching. He didn't interfere, didn't question her. But his fists were clenched behind his back. 15 tense minutes later, Craig handed Nicole a small toy and walked off with a dramatic sigh, not even looking back. Renee stood frozen for a moment, then finally turned and walked back toward Carter, with Nicole in her arms. He didn't say a word. Can you take us home? She asked quietly. Of course. By the time they arrived at her apartment, Nicole had fallen asleep in the back seat. Carter carried her up the steps without being asked, carefully tucking her into bed while Renee hovered in the doorway, arms crossed tightly over her chest. When he stepped out, she looked exhausted, like the years had collapsed onto her shoulders all at once. They sat in silence on the couch for a few minutes. The only sound, the hum of the refrigerator and Nicole's white noise machine through the wall. Carter glanced toward the hallway. She didn't hesitate to run to him. She remembers the good stuff, Renee whispered. Kids always do. Carter turned to her gently. You okay? She nodded, but her jaw was tight. Riley told me, he said after a pause. About what happened, about Craig. Renee let out a bitter laugh, small and sharp. Of course she did. She said you were with him for a year. Didn't know he was married until the wife showed up at the hospital after you had Nicole. Renee's face flinched. Yeah. That was the highlight of my postpartum journey. Carter didn't joke. You chose to stay with him after that. I did, she said softly. Because I thought, if he stayed, he'd be better. For Nicole? For me. But he was never really present. Just guilty. Then distant. Then gone. I guess you finally woke up, Carter said. Woke up, were in the bed, and locked the door behind him. There was silence again. You think I'm him, Carter said quietly. Renee looked at him sharply. No, I know you're not. But when you've been lied to that deeply, when someone holds your heart and breaks it for fun, it's hard to forget the feeling. I get it, he said, turning slightly toward her. But you should know, I'm not trying to replace him. Or rescue you, or rush you. Renee's eyes shimmered, but she didn't blink. I'm not him, Renee. I don't ghost. I don't hide wives. I don't break promises. She exhaled shakily. It's hard to trust. I know, he said. But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. She looked down at her hands twisted in her lap. Craig being back just brings everything up again, she admitted, and I hate that. Carter reached over it and gently placed his hand on hers. Let it come up. Just don't face it alone. She didn't pull away. A full week passed. No texts, no calls, no playful afternoon meetups. Carter waited, patient at first, then anxious, then quietly unraveling. He had given her space, just like she needed. But each day without hearing from Renee, gnawed at something deeper inside him. It wasn't just about being ignored. It was about the fear creeping in, that maybe she was slipping away, that maybe Craig's return had shaken something loose inside her, that even Carter couldn't fix. By the 8th day, he couldn't take it anymore. He drove straight to her apartment. Melody answered the door with a tired but knowing look and wordlessly nodded down the hall. Carter walked slowly, his pulse pounding, until he reached the open doorway of the living room. Renee sat curled on the couch, a blanket around her shoulders, eyes red and distant. He didn't wait for an invitation. I tried to give you space, Carter said softly, stepping inside. But you're building up walls, Renee, and I'm afraid, if I don't knock them down now, I'm going to lose you. And Nicole. Renee's eyes filled with tears immediately. I'm sorry. He moved closer. Craig's visit ripped open everything, she said. All the guilt, the shame. I feel like a fool every time I think about my past. It took me a long time to come out of the depression I fell into after having Nicole. I kept wondering, how did I let someone like him have so much control over me? Her voice cracked. I don't want to do that to you. I don't want you to suffer because I'm still anxious, Still scared I'll never be enough. Carter knelt in front of her, taking her trembling hands into his. Renee, he said quietly, I'm not going to walk away. I'm already too deep in. I want more than your friendship. I want the long term, the birthdays, the late nights, the messy mornings, the real life. Carter, she whispered, you can't think that way. You deserve someone who isn't. I've been thinking that way, he interrupted, ever since you refused to call me the night we met. She blinked, startled. I don't chase women, Renee, he said. But I chased you, because you're worth it. I'm not going anywhere. Tears rolled freely down her cheeks now. I'm a mess. Carter leaned in, brushing a tear away with his thumb, then rested his forehead against hers. So am I, he whispered. So let's be messy, together. The next morning, Renee stood by the playground fence, watching Nicole climb the slide, while Craig stood awkwardly a few feet away. Her stance was firm, her words clear and calm. Craig, I appreciate that you're trying to be in Nicole's life now, but let's get one thing straight. I'm not the same woman you left. And she's not just your daughter when it's convenient. Craig opened his mouth to speak, but she raised a hand. I'm building something with Carter, she continued. He's not a placeholder. He's not temporary. He's been here, showing up, for months. Nicole knows stability because of him. I know safety because of him. If you want to be a part of her life, then fine. But you'll respect the relationship we have. Craig swallowed hard, giving her a short nod. Renee took a breath and walked away, meeting Carter's car just around the corner. When she climbed inside, her hand instinctively found his. You okay? He asked. I am now, she said, lacing her fingers through his. We've got plans today, remember? That evening, Carter stepped into the private rooftop garden at Parker Events, transformed into a magical space with twinkle lights, candles, and a cozy dinner for two setup. Riley stood off to the side, beaming with pride. I had a little fun helping your girl set this up, she said, nudging his shoulder. Enjoy it. Carter shook his head, smiling in disbelief. She planned this? She planned everything, Riley said with a wink, then disappeared down the stairs. When Renee emerged minutes later in a deep burgundy dress, Carter was already breathless. They dined, laughed, and talked until the stars dotted the night sky. That night was more than just a first date. It was the start of something solid. Over the next few months, their bond deepened. With Carter's help and Renee's vision, Perry & Plate officially launched, complete with a logo, a website, and her first paid event booked for the following month. Renee worked hard, but now, she no longer carried the weight alone. Carter offered support, not control. Encouragement, not expectations. He was her partner in every sense of the word. Business, parenting, and heart. And then, one sunny afternoon in the living room, everything changed. Nicole sat on the floor with Carter, stacking blocks with intense focus. Renee was folding laundry nearby, smiling to herself as the two laughed. Nicole clumsily dropped a block, then looked up with bright eyes and said, Daddy, help me. The room went quiet. Carter's heart stopped. He turned slowly, meeting Renee's wide eyes. He hesitated, then asked gently, Was that okay? Renee walked over, crouched next to Nicole, and kissed the top of her curls. She sees you, Renee said softly, looking up at him. And if that's what she feels, then yes, it's more than okay. He turned to Nicole, his voice thick with emotion. Can I really be your dad? He asked. Nicole nodded happily. You are my daddy. Carter pulled her into his arms, blinking back tears. That moment became a new route in their story, one of love, trust, and the family they were building together. It started with a call on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Hey girl, Riley said, her voice light with excitement. We're throwing Carter a surprise birthday party next week at the Parker estate. Bring your mom and Nicole. It's going to be something special. Renee smiled, balancing her phone on her shoulder while stirring a pot on the stove. What can I bring? Dessert? Wine? Nothing but yourself, Riley said. But come early. I could use some help setting up. You got it, Renee said, already penciling it into her calendar. The following Saturday, Renee arrived at the grand Parker estate, a few hours before the guests. She wore jeans, a tied-back headscarf, and no makeup, ready to work. Nicole was with Melody, who would join them closer to the start time. Riley met her at the front door with an apron and a grateful grin. "You're the best." Together, they worked in the sprawling kitchen, arranging fruit platters, prepping finger foods, and taste-testing mini quiches, while laughing over old stories Riley shared about Carter as a teen. "You know he once shaved off one eyebrow on a dare," Riley said, snickering. "Oh, please, tell me there are pictures," Renee replied, nearly dropping the tray from laughter. By late afternoon, the garden had transformed into an elegant affair. Twinkle lights lined the trees. Soft jazz floated from hidden speakers, and long tables were draped in gold and white linen. Friends, family, and colleagues filtered in, greeting each other with warm hugs and curious glances toward the gate, awaiting the man of the hour. Just before sunset, Carter arrived. Everyone shouted, "Surprise!" Carter chuckled and clutched his chest dramatically. "Y'all trying to give me a heart attack?" Riley rolled her eyes. "You're not that old, Carter." What no one else knew, except Riley, was that Carter had planned the entire thing. He hadn't wanted a huge fuss, but he had wanted the perfect moment. As the party flowed into golden hour, Carter moved toward the small stage Riley had set up earlier for speeches. He clinked a spoon against his glass and smiled at the crowd. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight," he began, his voice rich with emotion. "I was told this was a surprise party, but let's be honest, nothing in my life surprises me more than the love I've found this past year." The crowd murmured softly, glancing at Renee, who stood frozen near the edge of the garden. Carter cleared his throat and held out his hand. "Renee, can you come up here for a second?" Her breath hitched. Riley grinned, like she'd been holding her tongue for weeks. Renee stepped forward slowly, her heart racing. Carter took her hands. "From the moment you didn't call me, I knew you were different. You've challenged me, grounded me, made me better. And you brought Nicole into my life, our life. I didn't plan for any of this, but I want to spend the rest of my life protecting it." Then, Carter dropped to one knee, revealing a velvet box with a stunning ring that shimmered in the soft light. "Will you marry me?" Before Renee could speak, Nicole, standing with Melody near the front, squealed. "Yes." Laughter erupted across the garden. Renee's hand flew to her mouth, eyes brimming with tears as she looked down at the man who had stood by her, seen her fully, and never once asked her to be anything less than who she was. She nodded through her tears. "Yes, yes, Carter." The applause was deafening. Riley wiped away a tear and whispered to herself. "Finally." Carter stood, lifting Renee into his arms as Nicole ran to join them, grabbing both their legs in a tiny hug. Under the twinkling lights, the Parker family didn't just celebrate a birthday. They celebrated the beginning of forever. 3 months later, the Parker estate bloomed with life once again. This time, not for a birthday or a surprise, but for the beginning of a new chapter. The garden had been transformed into a fairy tale setting. White roses and soft blush peonies lined the aisle. Draped ivory fabric framed a custom-built arch, beneath which Carter and Renee would vow their forever. The late afternoon sun bathed everything in gold, casting a warm, gentle glow over rows of elegant white chairs filled with family, friends, and loved ones. Inside the main house, the bride was getting ready. Renee stood in front of a full-length mirror, wearing a gown of soft satin that hugged her curves and flowed into a delicate train. Her hair was swept up in a loose bun, curls cascading softly down one side. Her makeup was subtle, elegant, radiant, highlighting the beauty that Carter had fallen in love with from the very beginning. Behind her, Riley helped adjust her veil, tears of pride already glistening in her eyes. "You're stunning," Riley whispered. "I'm terrified," Renee whispered back, though a smile tugged at her lips. Riley chuckled. "Terrified is normal. But you're also ready. And he's all in." Down the hall, Melody waited with tears of joy and nerves of her own. When Renee stepped into the foyer, Melody took a slow breath, then offered her arm. "You ready, baby?" Renee nodded, eyes shining. "Let's do this, Mom." Out in the garden, guests rose to their feet as soft music began to play. All eyes turned to the end of the aisle, where a tiny vision in white tulle and flower petals came skipping forward. Nicole, the flower girl, took her job very seriously, tossing petals with extra flair and waving proudly at Carter as she passed. He smiled wide, his heart full, and then he saw Renee. Walking arm in arm with her mother, Renee met Carter's gaze and felt every ounce of fear disappear. In its place was certainty, peace, and overwhelming love. Riley stood proudly as maid of honor, dabbing her eyes as Carter took Renee's hands under the arch. The vows were simple, heartfelt, and personal. When the officiant finally said, "You may kiss the bride," Carter didn't hesitate. He kissed her deeply, gently, like a man who'd waited a lifetime for this very moment. And with Nicole clapping excitedly at their side, the Parkers became a family in name, in heart, and in every beautiful way that mattered. 3 years later, on a quiet spring morning, Renee sat alone in the master bathroom of their sun-drenched home. The air was still. Her heart wasn't. She stared down at the small white stick in her hand, the two unmistakable pink lines glowing back at her like a secret too big to contain. Her breath caught. A smile slowly formed. Moments later, barefoot and still in her robe, she walked down the hall to the home office where Carter sat at the desk, glasses low on his nose, scanning her latest business financial projections. "Baby," he said without looking up, "these numbers are looking really good. You're in the green across the board. You could expand if you're ready, add another team, maybe even open a second location." Renee stood in the doorway, arms crossed and heart racing. "I can't." Carter looked up, confused. "Why not? You know I got your back." "I know," she said, stepping into the room. "But I'll be busy doing something else." He tilted his head. "Doing what?" She didn't say a word, just walked over to his desk and placed the pregnancy test gently on top of the papers he'd been reviewing. Carter's eyes flicked down. He blinked once, twice. Then his hand slowly picked up the test. His mouth parted. He began. She nodded. He stood so fast his chair nearly toppled over. "You're pregnant?" Renee laughed. "Looks like it." Carter let out a stunned breath, then let out a louder one. Half laughter, half joy, and swept her off the floor, spinning her in his arms. "This is real?" he whispered against her cheek. "It's real," she said, holding him tightly. Just then a small voice piped up from the doorway. "Why are you yelling, Mom?" They turned to find Nicole standing there in her pajamas, holding her favorite stuffed bunny, a sleepy squint in her eyes. Carter crouched to her level, his smile wide and full of pride. "Because, sweetheart, you're going to be a big sister." Nicole gasped. "Really?" Renee nodded, kneeling beside Carter. "Really, baby." Nicole let out a squeal and immediately started bouncing in circles, her curls flying and her bunny forgotten on the floor. "I'm gonna be a big sister. I'm gonna teach them everything, even how to eat snacks without spilling." Renee and Carter burst into laughter as they pulled her into a tight family hug. And just like that, a new chapter began, full of love, growth, and the kind of joy that only comes from building something real together. The end. Hope you enjoyed this heartwarming story by Green Tea Tales. Support our channel with likes, comments, and subscribe. Thank you.